Hey everybody, so this final video is going to be discussing various joint movements. I'm not going to be able to get to every single joint movement, but I'll go over the ones that are people most familiar with, the most general joint movements. So with that said, I'm going to do the best I can with this little screen here. I can only do so much. These images are only so good too. So with that said, you may use different videos from online. I highly suggest using the crash course videos because he does a phenomenal job of demonstrating these different movements, and the animations on there are really great. So that said, let's just jump right into it. Keep in mind, these are all synovial joints. Again, these are the ones that are synarthrotic, so they are going to be able to move in all directions freely. And the first type of joint movements we're going to discuss are those that are called angular movements. The reason why is because it's all about an angle. Are you making the angle smaller or larger, right? So if you look at my arm as best you can as a straight line, this would be 180 degrees, right? Straight. If I start to bend it, now it's at 90 degrees. And I keep going shorter, smaller, smaller, or I can go larger towards 180 degrees. So what are those terms known as? Flexion is when you flex on someone, right? And then extension is when you extend those muscles. So in other words, whenever you have contraction towards the body, in this case the bicep, that's going to be flexion. Whereas if you're relaxing these bicep muscles and extending, you're now contracting the muscles underneath. So that's extension. That said, you can also hyperextend. In this case, with my elbow, I don't want to do that, right? That's going to hurt, right? It's when I go extra, I go beyond the 180 degrees. When I'm looking at something like my hand, right, I can hyperextend this direction. This is normal, right? I'm not in any pain. This is normal extension, and this is flexion, right? So with that said, flexion, extension, hyperextension. It depends on what we're talking about. Sometimes hyperextension is a normal thing. And as you can see from the image, we can also see the same things with our neck, as well as our back and our torso. Next up, a different kind of movement. This is not angular. This is known as circumduction. What that means is you could take your arm and move it in a circle. Think of it like steering wheel. You're doing a steering wheel, right? So that is known as circumduction because it's like a circle. Next one, these terms are going to become more familiar as you think back to the first week here. Don't get me wrong, these images are not phenomenal. They kind of look like Sims characters from the early 2000s probably, or even sooner. So with that said, medial versus lateral rotation. So if you're moving medial towards the middle of the body, that would be a medial rotation. Whereas if you're moving laterally towards the outside of your body, that is a lateral rotation. Another term you're probably familiar with at this point. This is one that you can use with both your whole entire body, laying on your stomach or on your back, or your hands. So this is pronation versus supination. As you can tell, why there's such a big difference is looking at the bone structure on the inside of your forearm. So if you are in the supinated position where your hand is straight up, I think of it like holding a bowl of soup. Supinating, both of these bones in your forearm are going to be right next to each other. They're going to be parallel. However, if you were to take that supinate position and you were to pronate, like a pro basketball player dribbling, what that's going to do is take those bones and move them over each other so they're crisscross. So that's pronation. Same idea with laying on your back or laying on your stomach, laying in the prone or the supine position. That's where they get the names from. This is another example of what we talked about earlier with flexion, and we're looking at extension, as well as you could look at other types of movements of the hands and of the wrists, or forearms in this case. A couple other ones just for your towards the lower half of your body where the feet are. We also have inversion and eversion. So if you invert your foot, you're moving towards the inside, whereas if you evert it, it's going towards the outside. And then lastly, we could talk about dorsiflexion and plantarflexion. So dorsiflexion, think of it like the dorsal fin of a fish. It's facing the top, right? So that's when you're taking your foot and you're pushing it upwards. Whereas plantar flexion is when you're planting your foot down the ground, you're pressing off, right? That'll be plantar flexion. I just ran through these terms. I know you may have to go through it a couple times. Maybe you already feel pretty comfortable with some of these terms. The bottom line is there are a lot of terms out there, but the most important thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that sometimes it's just thinking about it. right? Please don't try to memorize these terms. Don't just go in and start thinking to yourself, I need to memorize them all, because then you're just going to try to really quickly memorize terms and not understand them. Whereas if you think of this, maybe you are familiar with the dorsal fin of a fish. Dorsiflexion is facing upwards towards the back. Or plantar flexion, you're planting your foot down. Sometimes it's as simple as that. So please take your time and learn these. It's not just for this chapter, it's for anybody continuing in this field. So please take your time on this. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to help you out.